Well, dear colleagues, hope you can hear me well. That's my big pleasure to welcome and to host the lecture at the Faculty of Arti Tiku Singh. I had personally a pleasure to enjoy our conversation last week, so I'm 100% sure that today's event would be of very big interest and usefulness for all of you. And I'm also very happy that we are able to continue the big project logic of development of Indian studies at the faculty that we started last academic year, when we're happy to host offline our guests. We really enjoyed lots of online seminars for last 3 years, and I would say not enough, but it's much better to see in 3D here, and especially because for last half a year we clearly see a profound shift of understanding that Russia and India have lots of potential for the development of joint cooperative projects, and it's good. If we don't speak about the narrow community of Indian experts, it's pretty brand new information for many people, unfortunately. Hope not for students of the Higher School of Economics, but still. But what we still don't know as good as we should, what's going on in India, especially now. What are the profound trends, processes that define your national priorities? And of course, the chance to hear it from the first-hand source, it's great pleasure and honor for us. Thank you. I won't steal time because you definitely have lots of interesting things to discuss today.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Likasheva, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you about India and the changing dynamic in India. But before I do that, let me also thank World Economy and International Affairs faculty and the Dean, as well as the University of HSC. Also grateful to people in Moscow who've been helping me in the last few days. I've been actually going around the city. In fact, yesterday I was at St. Petersburg, even though I don't speak a single word of Russian, but people were warm, people were helpful and very cooperative. So all kudos to all the Russian people. Thank you for that. But now coming to the topic of the day, I'm going to read out a very small passage from an article which was published in 1844. And the magazine in which it was published is called Notes from the Fatherland. Probably you would know. Now, this was in fact, the most influential Russian magazine at the time. And this traveler called Alexander Roshev, he writes, "I was struck by the poverty and dire misery which afflicted 3/4 of the Indian population. India," he wrote, "is an impoverished, disenfranchised colony looted by the British." Now, I'm going to make this session a little interactive because I think I would really like to see engagement of the students. Do you know how much money, how much wealth and treasure the British looted in India? Does anyone have any idea? Any hands? Okay, go ahead, take a guess.
Tremendous, because the sum was such great, such monstrous. But as far as I remember, there were another problems concerning how much did exactly British government looted from India, and how much, for example, private companies looted from India before
East India Company. Yes. Now, let me tell you, by a very serious estimate, the British looted $45 trillion in today's monetary value from India in their 200 years of rule. $45 trillion. That's not a joke. Why am I talking about this figure? I'll come to that in a bit, but let me tell you 177 years later, that is last year, in the Moscow Times, another Russian author wrote something very interesting. Dmitry Trenin. He said, Russians should acknowledge India's new status and self-image as a great power, its focus on rapid economic development, and its ambition to become a global economic powerhouse and a leader in modern technologies. Now, this he wrote before the war in Ukraine. This was last year. This was not after the new evolving situation that we all are aware of. India has covered a long distance in the last 75 years since its independence. India has over 400 languages. It has over 1.35 billion people. But in the last 75 years, bygones have been bygones. The British colonial rule, the memory of it, the horror of British colonial rule is history. But today, India has just replaced its former colonizer, that is the British. It has replaced the United Kingdom as the 5th largest economy. It today has an economy of over $3.5 billion. India's growth rate is today 7%. Now, this story that I tried to weave about, what a Russian said 177 years ago and another Russian said just last year. I weave this story to tell you, to convey the idea that India, which everyone trashed as a basket case just 75 years ago, has turned around the story. It no longer is that basket, that trash case, which many naysayers used to say about India. If you look at the New York Times, if you look at BBC, if you look at the entire Western press of 75 years ago, you will read a similar narrative that India is a hopeless case. But how have we done it? What exactly are we doing? And what has been achieved in the last 75 years? To begin with, I'm going to make it very brief. India is a democratic republic. With all its failings, with all the challenges that we have had in the last 75 years, but consistently and persistently, we have had elections. It's the people of India who choose their governments. So that's one extraordinary thing about India, which many people say that 75 years ago, it was not even a state. It was not a nation state. But we have shown that we are a republic. We have a constitution. We have a secular democratic constitution where everybody is equal, where everybody has the right to all the fundamental rights. Apart from elections, apart from the constitution, we have today 75% literacy. Once again, I would say that these things probably sound rhetorical. They sound probably, just people who like to, faff and who like to just be good at oration, they will quote these things. But it's important to understand where we started from. A country which was completely exploited, which was persecuted, penalized, people who were killed in millions in 1947 when India was partitioned. India was divided into two countries, India and Pakistan. Yet, with all the persecution, with all the challenges of the last 75 years, we have changed our story. Now, from being a food deficient nation, we today are a leading agricultural nation. We have had green revolution in India. I'm giving you this information which is very basic, which is common, but I'm going to explain this information so that you contextualize today's India in this framework. So we have had green revolution, we have had white revolution, we were food deficient. Today we have food surplus, we have dairy farming. But apart from these things, India also has the largest rail network in Asia and the second largest in the world. That's not a small feat, given the kind of poverty we have seen, 75 years ago. Astonishingly, many would think that such a poor developing country, what would they have done in science? But we did. India launched its first space satellite in 1975. India did its first nuclear test in 1974. India became a nuclear state in 1998. India sent satellites to the moon. India, in its very first attempt, reached Mars. And India has sent around 10 satellites in an orbit in one go. Now, these things are unthinkable of a colony which had nothing, which was left with nothing. We had nothing. And mind you, when Queen Elizabeth died recently, not many people in India showed any sympathy because there's a historical memory of the imperial colonial rule. Now, India has today 100 unicorns. By unicorn, I mean companies which are worth $1 billion. And India is today the largest digital market. India also is the fastest growing startup ecosystem in the world. Above all, when the coronavirus pandemic happened, the naysayers said that India would be the worst affected country because of our population, right? But India turned around the story. India did administer 2 billion vaccines in just 18 months. That's not a small feat. My own story is, even though it might sound a bit self-aggrandizing, but my own story is not ordinary. And I feel somewhere the story of India runs parallel with my own story. I come from the northern state of Jammu and Kashmir, over which India and Pakistan have fought 4 wars. Pakistan invaded in 1947. And after the disintegration of Soviet Union, Kashmir was attacked by Pakistan through cross-border terrorism. My family was one of the people of around 300,000 people who were subjected to exodus and exile. We were targeted because of our religious identity. Kashmir is a Muslim majority area within the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And we were seen as infidels by Islamists. So Islamic terror hit our state. I was just 12 years old when we got displaced. got uprooted. We had no home. My family lived in a refugee camp. I grew up in small hovels and refugee camps in the southern part of the state. So I've been a refugee in my own country. And if you look at my own story, you'll see how India has also evolved. While I grew up with nothing, an underprivileged background, my parents had to slog. We barely had enough to eat, but we worked hard. Even as I have been a refugee in my own country, but this story of working hard, struggling, and making something out of life, and taking India to another level of growth and prosperity is a result of that struggle, is a result of that hard work that my parents' generation, my own generation, and my generation Indians have done and have changed India's story in the last 30 years. I studied. I chose to be a journalist because I wanted to find out the truth. I wanted to know what happened in the northern state of Kashmir. I wanted to know why Pakistan infiltrated Islamist terrorists in Kashmir. If you remember, this story is connected with Afghanistan. This story is also connected with what is known as the defeat of Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And the fact is that cross-border terrorism in Kashmir was backed by Pakistan and the US. The arms and ammunition that were given to Taliban to fight Russians in Afghanistan, some of it got infiltrated into Kashmir as well. Those arms and ammunition were used to raise Islamist terror organization in Kashmir. So we became victims of that foreign policy of the United States and Pakistan as well. This story aside, now the situation today in India, or for that matter, my own story, I worked in mainstream media in India for over 2 decades. I worked in the biggest media organizations, whether it was Hindustan Times or Times of India. I studied in India as well as in the United States. Now, today, after over 2 decades, I am the first woman entrepreneur in national digital media from Kashmir. I am running a startup, as I was pointing out to you earlier, that India is the fastest growing startup ecosystems in the world. What does it indicate? It indicates that the story of India has changed from 1947, but not many people talk about it in the West or in the developed nations. In fact, in the last 30 years, very little conversation has happened between Indians and Russians, for example. Russians don't know what has happened and what all transformations have occurred in India in the last 30 years. And Indians don't know what has changed in Russia in the last 30 years. In fact, I was surprised to see the kind of infrastructure Russia has. I compare it with the infrastructure that I have seen in the United States. And I feel that Russia is on a magnificent trajectory of growth and prosperity. There's something in the air of this place that tells me that Russian future ahead is very bright. But this is not known because there is massive scale of media propaganda. You talk to people in India, they'll tell you that, oh, Russia is probably poor, it's developing. They don't have the exact or the real understanding of Russia as you would know. Because the Western media propaganda has ensured that Russia is projected as a monster, as they are trying to project India today as a fascist country. I don't know how many of you read the Western press, but today President Putin, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they are shown to be as if they are fascist, they are totalitarian, authoritarian leaders, and their countries are fracturing, their countries are up in the arms. This is the kind of narrative that's built by Western media. So I think there's a need for conversation between Indians and Russians to know exactly how we can contribute in each other's future and growth. Let me also give you a small factoid. It was Peter the Great who actually established the earliest relationship with India. He requested the court of Aurangzeb at the time to start the trade relations. And since then, every ruler in Russia and every ruler in India have maintained that relationship. This relationship today is significant in view of how the world order has changed, especially since the coronavirus pandemic. I have a lot to say about the current world order and how it's evolving and how India and Russia relationship has evolved in the last few years. But if you have any questions to ask, please note them down right now so that we can wrap up this conversation, this seminar in time. And please, ma'am, please let me know when the time is up for my yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So now Russia and India relationship. India is dependent on Russian arms and ammunition. In fact, 60% of arms and ammunition that India buys, it buys from Russia. So we are the biggest buyers of Russian weapons and defense systems. Despite the fact that the US has imposed sanctions on Russia ever since the conflict in Ukraine, India-Russia relationship has been strong and stronger by the day. And India also bought S-400 weapon systems, which are very sophisticated defense systems. I don't know how many students here right now are from defense studies, but essentially, India and Russian partnership in defense is massive. Russia is also interested in helping India build its domestic defense weapons and systems. So that is one area where the partnership remains intact. There are other areas where India and Russia have now come closer because of the Ukraine conflict. For example, India was buying massive oil from Russia on discounted price during the conflict, which somehow was also compensating for the losses that are incurred due to embargo on oil and gas in Europe. That's one thing. But India and Russia also have other areas where they can explore and are exploring partnership. For example, as I said, India is the largest digital market in the world. So that's one area where they can improve their relationship. Simultaneously, India and Russia can also look at education. I feel that lots of Russian students should be coming to India, and there should be exchange programs where Indian students also come to Russian universities. I think this culture should be I think this culture was there before the disintegration of Soviet Union. This culture should be revived because for the last 30 years, as I said, there's been a vacuum. There has been a gap in our understanding about each other. Neither students nor even common people really know where we are on science and technology, what contribution we are making in agriculture, for example. We know that Russia is interested in the development of Far East. There's a lot of agricultural expertise available in India, as I told you, because of the Green Revolution. That's again another area the two countries can look at. Apart from all this, I think there's also the spiritual angle. And this is my own observation. In the last 7-8 days, I traveled in Moscow and also St. Petersburg. There was one marked difference between Russia and the West. So opulence is not development. When I say opulence, I mean to say the grandeur. It's not development. Development is when everybody has sufficient food, energy, clothing, the basics of life, and everything is organized. Everything is convenient and easy. The West looks opulent. The wealth and the treasure, it's all there in your face. Russia is minimalistic. That's how I look at Russia after having traveled to all these places. And I feel there's a philosophy behind this minimalism, because greed does not lead you to peace and harmony. Development can lead to peace and harmony. So one has to make that distinction. And I think this is where Russia, in my view, takes an upper hand. It has an upper moral ground because people are sufficiently developed. People's lives are sufficiently optimal and sufficiently convenient. So I think there's a spiritual angle to this, because India also believes in, especially Prime Minister Modi's vision of taking everyone along and having equitable distribution of opportunities and of development. So I think on these areas, the two nations can go ahead, and I'm sure the future will be Russia and India together. Thank you.
Guys, do somebody have questions? You see, I have questions.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm a specialist in this.
There's a student at the back.
Oh, okay. Please.
Very great. Thank you for your session. I wanted to ask a simple question that's more about past. However, as far as I know, I'm not very great specialist on India. I'm just trying to know as much as I can. But as I know, India was in team of neutral countries. However, during Cold War, I mean, but its economy was.
Well, during the Cold War, India actually suffered economically as well as geopolitically. In fact, India, despite the fact, our Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru had said that we are non-aligned, but India was seen by the West as a member of the Soviet bloc. And we were penalized for that for a very long time. Also, the socialism that Prime Minister Nehru, Indira Gandhi pursued, it did not help India very much. It may have helped us initially because India had just, came out of the colonial rule in 1947, and there was this legacy of capitalism exploiting India. And for that, initially, India on the socialist path, India was looking at Soviet Union. India was, in fact, copying many of the institutions. Even education system, for that matter, was based on how the Soviet Union education system was. So, on the whole, I would say, economically, it did not help India. It hurt India economically. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Japanese-Indian relationships, because it was, I've had research about it, and I know that Japan is one of the biggest investors in India, and does these affect Indian-Russian relationship, in your opinion?
Well, I understand the import of your question. India-Japan relations are good. Japan-Russia relations are not good. We know that. But international relations are a very complicated affair. It's possible to be friends with one member in the international relations, and at the same time, the same member can be friends with your enemy. So this is classic international relations, because all nations look after their own interests to begin with. Now with Japan, we have a good relationship, but at the same time, if you really think about Russia-China relationship, now Russia-China are very good friends, and their bond has strengthened, especially in the Ukrainian conflict as well. But India and China have a history of hostility. India and China went to war in 1962, and India and China continue to have disputes over the line of actual control. In fact, there was a standoff, and it was only recently that there's been disengagement of troops in Ladakh, which is the Northern Union Territory. So these issues are complicated, but it's quite possible that Russia and India, as they have, historically also, maintained a relationship despite all these complicated issues elsewhere. So India having a good relationship with Japan as well as the United States, for example. Forget Japan. Japan is a small country. United States. India is a strategic partner of the United States today. And it's the US-led NATO which is fighting a war against Russia in Ukraine, in a proxy war, right? But the world at the end of the day has to coexist. People have to coexist. Nations have to coexist. Communities have to coexist. So you cannot wish away one nation or, leave only one nation in the world. Everybody has to come to some terms. Sometimes there may be pressure from one camp and pressure from another camp, but mind you, India has maintained strategic independence as far as Russia is concerned. On the question of Ukraine, India persistently abstained from all the votes at the United Nations against Russia. What does that tell you? That tells you that despite the political pressure, despite the international relations pressure, independence can be maintained, provided you know how to play it.
Very informative. My questions are of two parts. The first one is, in your submission, you said the future is Russia and India, right? And I think it's safe for us to say right now that there's a shift in the world order from unipolarity, America, to multipolarity. And there's no way we can talk about that without mentioning China. And I also want to know, my second question is this: how is it possible for India to be in the same association with China, BRICS, and still, you know, how do you do it? I didn't get it.
As I said, in international relations, everything is possible. India is part of Quad, that is Japan, India, Australia, and United States. It's a formulation, it's a grouping to contain China. That's one. India is also a part of BRICS, where China, India, Russia, Brazil, South Africa are together to empower this bloc, right? In international relations, all these equations are possible because all states are at the end of the day looking at their own interests. They are going to, you know, play it both ways. Sometimes they're going to play it one way, sometimes they are going to play it the other way. But as I said, look at China also. Do you know who's the biggest contributor to China's growth? Well said. United States of America, which now calls China as the biggest threat to the US and the world. But it was the US that gave a huge opportunity for China to get assimilated into the global trade, and thus made China the manufacturer of the whole world. It's the Chinese goods everywhere. Who made that happen? It's the US. Today, because of the Ukrainian conflict, one would assume that, you know, it's going to affect only Europe and Russia and Ukraine. So who's benefiting? It's the United States as well as China. So international relations are a very complicated game. You cannot have easy answers. There are no black and white answers. They will always be in the gray and in the nuance. But what was your first question? Yeah, multipolarity. Indeed. So after World War II, we entered into the era of Cold War, right? Two superpowers were fighting for eminence, preeminence, or supremacy. And with the disintegration of Soviet Union, United States was the uncontested superpower of the world. But 30 years later, today, we have China contesting for the same position. We have a bloc, as you said, BRICS, also asking for a say in the global affairs. We have Quad on the other side, which is also seeing itself as a power. We have India, which is also calling itself a power. So all these nations are essentially seeking a greater say in the global affairs, because when you give unadulterated, unrestrained power to one nation, wrongs will happen. Whether you look at the Middle East wars today, whether you look at the war in Ukraine today, whether you look at India-Pakistan war, there's one nation whose hand has always been there. and that's the United States of America. That's when unbridled power to one nation is given. That's what happens. So I think all these emerging nations, the aspirational powers, the powers which are already there, whether it's Russia, China, they are going to seek greater say in the global affairs and not take unilateral decisions of the US on face value. That's what's happening.
Great. May you please just, oh, it works, okay. Thank you very much for this great introduction into the current state of Indian economics. And to my question, there is a big stereotype about rigid social stratification system in India, caste system, and could you comment this issue, maybe reinforce it or destroy it?
So caste system has been a reality of India. And we are fortunate that the founding fathers and mothers of the Republic of India ensured that in the Constitution, caste is not really recognized as a feature for governance, which means, as I said earlier also, the Constitution of India grants equal rights to everyone, to every individual. You cannot discriminate on the basis of caste, color, creed, sex, or religion. That is an accomplishment of the Republic. Now, in reality, is caste a factor? Yes, it still is a factor. A lot of people still believe in it. A lot of people still socially make their own stratifications, and also sort of, their attitudes, their behavior is discriminatory towards lower caste. And lower caste themselves will have a different approach to upper caste. But by law and by the Constitution, it's not permissible. There's in fact punishment. There's penalty for caste discrimination, and it is being exercised by a lot of what we call Dalits in India. Having said that, I would also say that caste in the last decade or so has also diminished when it comes to electoral politics of India. In many of the states where caste used to be a dominant factor, is not as dominant and as strong as it used to be. For example, there's a party called Bahujan Samaj Party, BSP. It was a party of Dalits. It was a party of lower caste. And at one point of time, its leader, Mayawati, was the chief minister of a state called Uttar Pradesh, which is the most caste-ridden state. But today, this party, which was once in power and had a lot of popularity, had a lot of backing amongst the people, is nowhere in the picture, because people are now voting across caste lines. There is, what I can really tell you is that there is a Hindu consolidation in India. Hindus are voting as a Hindu bloc rather than a caste bloc. Like, we have Brahmins, and we have then Kshatriya and Vaishya and Dalits. But today, Hindus are voting as a bloc. Vis-a-vis, there is Hindu-Muslim communal politics. That is happening today in India. But the caste politics has gone in the background. Thank you.
You mentioned the Hindu-Muslim conflict, and I wonder whether it can be a threat for Indian democracy, actually, because there are some researches conducted that say that India is shifting nowadays not from democracy to authoritarian regime, but from liberal democracy to illiberal democracy. Would you please comment on that?
Yeah, good question. And this is what I was talking about earlier, that if you look at the Western press, they will, you would think that India is this fascistic country where Hindus and Muslims are rioting against each other, they're killing each other, massacring each other. But it's not true, because as I said, one, because of the law, because of the constitution, discrimination based on religion, caste, creed, color, sex is not permitted. Second thing, that if you look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's policies, I myself, used to be a very, very strong critic of all parties, including the current BJP. I have been very critical of almost every political party in India. And even now, when I see there are issues, for example, this rigidity about, for example, beef, that people should not eat beef. I am opposed to these ideas because I think Hinduism to begin with is liberal. The Hindu culture, the Hindu ethos is liberal, it's plural. There is no dogma, there is no doctrine which forbids people from doing anything or saying anything or believing in anything. That is why we have thousands of gods, we have thousands of cultures. I've told you we have over 400 languages. And if you look at the kind of diversity we have, you would wonder, how is it possible if it was like a monotheistic religion, if it was organized religion? It's not. Hindu culture is not organized. It's free, it's open, it's pluralistic. Now this Hindu-Muslim issue, it's mostly a media creation because one, electronic media has figured out this is one issue that will rile up people. It does rile up people because the moment you show that, one member of, say, a Muslim community was targeted, they will then blow it out of proportion and say that the entire Muslim community is being targeted. It is being persecuted. It's not as if Muslims were not targeted and persecuted, say, 10 years ago. The worst riots that have happened 10 years ago or before Prime Minister Modi came to power in Delhi. If you look at Bombay riots, if you look at ethnic cleansing of Kashmiri Hindus, I am a victim. I've been a victim of Islamist terror. I've been a victim of Pakistan's cross-border terror. Nobody in 1990, when we were thrown out of our homes, when we were on the streets, when we were in the refugee camps, nobody said that it's a fascistic Muslim Islamist country. Did you ever read anything about it? 300,000 Kashmiri Hindus wiped out from a land which they have inhabited for last 10,000 years. Did you hear this? No. The media did not tell you that an entire Hindu community was wiped out from its roots, from its place, because then the media would have to say that, oh, this is an Islamist state. But what you will hear today is that one wrong committed, I'm not justifying wrong, I'm not justifying communal violence. I'm just telling you how small incidents are blown out of proportion, and then India is projected as if it's a fascistic country where everyone is Islamophobic, where everyone is out there to kill Muslims, whereas the reality is otherwise, that who I am here, like I am the victim. But I don't go around saying that, Hindus are not safe in their country. I'm saying that both Hindus and Muslims do commit violence against each other. I'm saying that Islamists have wiped out, have committed a genocide of Hindus in Kashmir, but that does not make India a fascistic country or an illiberal country. If that does not make an India an illiberal country, then why this argument is being made now when nobody is getting uprooted, nobody is getting massacred? Why is this argument being made now? So take Western media propaganda with a bucket of salt. That's what I will say.
I have a question concerning the Dalits, first of all, because listening to you, the problem of the Dalits is solved, but it's not only the press of Western countries. We know that some of the Dalits who wants to change the religion and to become Buddhist, Muslim, or become Sikh. Sometimes there are some organizations who push them back to return and to become Dalits again. And it was worked up a special procedure for return Dalits from converting religions back to Hindu. How can you explain this?
Well, again, a good question. I did not say the problem of Dalits has been resolved. In fact, I said in reality, caste discrimination at a social level is still being practiced. But I am also saying that the newer generations, the younger generations have changed their attitude, are changing their attitude. It's not the same as, say, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. If you talk to young people, they will have a completely different response as to the generations of your generation. But at the same time, this issue about conversion, for example, it's a major issue in India. In fact, when you try to convert people on the basis of an allurement, it causes social friction. It has caused social friction. That should conversion really happen through allurement? If you're going to give money to people to change his or her religion, because if he is from poor strata of society, he will see it as lucrative, or he will see it as an opportunity, or he will see it as a savior for his life. So this is a debate that is going on in India, whether conversions should happen to begin with. Because as I said, that the constitution and the law has already guaranteed equal rights to everyone. So it's not law and the constitution is not the problem. It's the society and the societal stratification or social behavior which has been the issue. And I'm saying that Dalits who had a lot of issues, say 10 years ago, I'm seeing a decline in those issues. I'm seeing that Dalits are also, for example, I can quote you, we have had prominent people in prominent positions of power who came from Dalit background. Or, for example, current president, Draupadi Murmu, is a tribal, the first tribal female president of India in last 75 years. We have had Dalit president. So the power structure is different, the social structure is different. I'm not saying the problem is resolved, the problem is still there, but it's declining.
I see. So I have okay, let it be like this. I hope that it will be so positive, but the policy itself concerning the Dalits and positive discrimination for Dalits. It's the problem when the system reborn itself. Because if you have a positive discrimination for some social group, this is the problem when only a narrow group of people from this Dalit society have opportunity to get some jobs in the administrative positions and all of this, but the others still want to rise their social position and to be converted or to choose different religion.
So as far as positive discrimination goes, this is guaranteed in the Constitution of India. There is affirmative action for Dalits, for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, in education, in employment, and elsewhere. Yes. So that's one. Now, going back to the question that you raised, that some organizations are trying to bring them back to their religion. Because there is, I think this needs to be debated, and I would leave this thought with you also. Is it fair to convert someone through allurement, through money, through bribery? This is a question that needs to be debated. Is it fair that I'm poor, I don't have money, and if you offer me money, I will convert? Is this a fair idea? I think this needs to be debated. Any other questions?
Incredibly grateful for your speech, and I'm frankly speaking, I'm not a great specialist on India at all, like I guess the vital part of our audience. However, my question isn't connected with heartful and essential topics of political statements of India and other countries at all. My question is connected with economical statement. As during your speech, you mentioned what India, after becoming independent, have started developing different industries like space program, nuclear energetic program, and what can you say about future of developing IT industry and science at all? Because I'm a cybersecurity student really interested in it.
Well, as you would know that India has a very substantial IT sector. In fact, the joke is that if an Indian is sitting in the plane, a white person sitting next to him would ask him, "Can you fix my computer?" So that's because India has invested in the IT sector in the last 30 years. We are going to, I think, a significant player in the digital market, in cybersecurity, in IT sector, because our young generations have immensely benefited from this one reform that we did after the, India failed on the balance of payment crisis in 1990. We had a serious economic crisis. And then we were forced to go for economic reforms by the IMF and the World Bank. And eventually, what we did was we set up, we invested in IT sector. And today, we have students also working in the artificial intelligence area. In fact, President Putin has shown his interest in building a smart city for India with artificial intelligence. Those areas are certainly the areas where you should be looking at. It is the future for sure.
I'm very grateful for your speech, and I hope you haven't got bored of the topic of Muslim and Hindu communication, since I'm not doubting your words, but there are some things that I'd like you to comment on. First of all, it is the citizenship amendment that was adopted in 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And on, for example, abolishment of autonomous status of your homeland or your home state, Jammu and Kashmir. Now there is no Jammu and Kashmir. There are two states with no extraordinary status, and it's linked with, I assume it's linked with the attitude of the government of Modi to Muslim ethnic groups, because if we touch upon the amendment, yes.
Understood your question. Let me first respond to Citizenship Amendment Act question. Well, do you know what the act is?
Yes, it gives opportunity to some ethnic groups, migrant ethnic groups from other countries that entered the country before 2014.
Let me explain it to you. When India got partitioned, as I told you earlier, in 1947, there was population exchange between India and Pakistan. Okay, and during the partition, millions were killed, millions. Now, in 1947, on the west side and the east side, we had West Pakistan, East Pakistan. In 1971, East Pakistan became Bangladesh, and West Pakistan became Pakistan. Today, we have in India 220 million Muslims. How many? 220 million Muslims. In this entire Indian subcontinent before 1947, Hindus used to live in both East Pakistan and West Pakistan. In the last 75 years, Indian Muslim population has grown and not at any point declined, whereas Hindus who were 14%, 15%, 20% in Pakistan and Bangladesh, they've reduced to 1%, 0.5%. They've been wiped out. What does that tell you about the entire Indian subcontinent? Where are Muslims safe? Where are Hindus safe? That answers your question, that Citizenship Amendment Act is essentially for those Hindus who are being persecuted, whether in Pakistan, Bangladesh, also in Afghanistan, because also Hindus used to live in Afghanistan also, Sikhs used to live in Afghanistan. But all these Indic religion people, now Indic religion, as I told you, Indic religions are not organized religions. They're not, controlled, and they're not religions with any doctrine, dogma. These are ways of life. And these people, when they are getting targeted by Taliban, by Pakistani Islamist terror groups, by Bangladeshi Islamist terror groups, when they are being wiped out, the indigenous people of these lands, when they are being wiped out, where will they go? They have no home. Like me, I have no home. I'm still homeless. I don't have a home. I don't have a home in India. I've been homeless for the last 32 years. I cannot have a home. Why? Because Islamist terror has ensured that I don't have a home, that I can't go back to my own homeland where I was born and raised. I'm not able to go. Coming to your second question, so about Jammu and Kashmir. When India became independent, Indian subcontinent had princely states, over 500 of them. And these princely states were given a choice, either to join the dominion of India or the dominion of Pakistan by the British. Now, most of these princely states went, here or there. Couple of them were confused. They were not sure what to do. One of them was my state. It was a princely state. It was headed by Maharaja Hari Singh. While he was making up his mind, and he was making up his mind only because Jammu and Kashmir at the time was a Muslim majority state. But he was a Hindu ruler. Yet which means he was conscientious. He was thinking about his subjects, that they are Muslim. Will they be okay? Whereas the legal right to join either of the states was only with the king, was with the ruler. So he did not necessarily ask people, but he was thinking. So while he was doing this, Pakistani raiders, Pakistani army, they attack Kashmir. Okay. And when they attack Kashmir, the Muslim population of the time, they side with India. Along with that, the ruler also signs an instrument of accession with India. Okay. So Jammu and Kashmir legally becomes a part of India. Now, Article 370, which was a law put in the Indian Constitution in 1950, when India became a republic, guaranteed Jammu and Kashmir autonomy, which you said autonomy. Fair? Okay. So it gave Jammu and Kashmir autonomy, and Jammu and Kashmir became a special state with special status in the Union of India. Now, why did this happen? Was this right given to other princely states in India? No, it wasn't. Hyderabad was also a Muslim area, but that princely state did not get this special status. Okay. Why was Jammu and Kashmir given special status? There is a lot of politics behind it. There was the British plan, the attack, the invasion itself in 1947. That's part of the story. Then Prime Minister Nehru, who also had a very close relationship with the Muslim popular leader of Kashmir Valley at the time, Sheikh Abdullah. That's also part of the story. But leave all of that aside, Jammu and Kashmir got special status. But Prime Minister Nehru, who gave this special status, also ensured, soon after doing this, ensured through legal mechanisms with the consent of the chosen representatives of Kashmir to erode Article 370 itself, which means that special status was special only in name. It wasn't really a special status. The only special status they had was that nobody could buy land there. Okay. The rest of many of the Indian laws were extended to Jammu and Kashmir, but many were not because Article 370 was there. Now, with the successive governments, lot of the autonomy which was guaranteed through 370 disappeared, vanished, because more central laws, because you see, a republic is always evolving. It's a dynamic process. What we needed 75 years ago we may not need it today. We will draft our laws according to our times. And then lot of laws which were implemented in the rest of India. For example, Dalits, which she pointed out. Dalits have equal rights. In Jammu and Kashmir, they did not, because we had separate law in Jammu and Kashmir. There was another law which was discriminatory against women of Jammu and Kashmir. If a woman of Jammu and Kashmir married a non-Jammu and Kashmir person, she immediately got disqualified as a subject of the state. She lost all her inheritance and she would lose all her rights in Jammu and Kashmir. Was it fair? Was it liberal? No, it wasn't. Was it good to Dalits? No, it wasn't. Was it good to lot of thousands of refugees who had come in 1947 during the partition in India? Was it fair to them? No. They had none of these people had rights except for women in Jammu and Kashmir like me. We went to court, and in 2002, a court judgment turned this whole ridiculous law down. And then, even then, women who married outsiders, their children could not inherit their rights or could not inherit their property in Jammu and Kashmir. So 370 was a highly illiberal law. It was not in favor of equality. Also, 370 automatically, when you give special status to a Muslim majority state, the whole idea of India gets defeated. The idea of a plural, secular India where everybody has equal rights gets defeated. Therefore, 370 was an illiberal law. It was not in favor of anyone. Have I responded to your question?
Thank you very much for your brilliant speech. I have a question. With nowadays emerging cross-border conflicts, especially which we have in our country, and the tense relationship between China and Taiwan, do you think the situation where India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan can get into armed crisis or even war ever possible? Thank you.
India and Bangladesh have very good relationship. In fact, Bangladesh and India have been supportive of each other ever since Bangladesh was created in 1971. So there is no way there will be a conflict between the two nations. Now, India and Pakistan, they have fought 4 conventional wars. And in the last 32 years, Pakistan has imposed cross-border terrorism in Kashmir. It has also wiped out the Hindu community in Kashmir. And there is still always a chance that India and Pakistan might go for another war. There is, you can't rule this out, because India and Pakistan hostility has not diminished in any way. It would have diminished had Pakistan taken a different course. That when in 1947, based on the demand of this political party Muslim League, an entire territory was given to them, to Pakistanis, to rule on their own, to have a separate country of their own. And yet they did not stop at that. They have been continually attacking India. They attacked in 47, they attacked in 65, in 71, in 99. And moreover, despite the fact that they have committed such horrendous crimes, they have been responsible for the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus in Kashmir, along with Islamist terrorists in Kashmir. Pakistan has continuously asking for more Kashmir. They continuously want Kashmir. Their one single agenda, their obsession is Kashmir. Their entire foreign policy of South Asia is determined by Kashmir. So unless and until they stop cross-border terrorism, unless and until they give up the demand of Kashmir, there's a possibility of confrontation, military confrontation between India and Pakistan. Well, as an Indian, I'm going to say Russia has got to be greater friends with India. So that's one. But at the same time, I think Russia will, and I think Russia is actually also very circumspect and very sensitive also about India's complicated relationship with China. So they do handle both these issues pretty well, I think, so far, because Russia has been involved in the back door, whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's a conflict, they try to bring these two countries together on the table to talk, because none of the countries can actually afford to have a war. None. So Russia, I would say that they are very deft at diplomacy. They have managed the Asian region pretty well. I don't think they need to change anything. I think they are quite circumspect about how India feels about China and why India feels threatened, because to begin with, China and India went to war in 1962. And China continues to show aggression, show its expansive policy in the northeast region of Arunachal Pradesh and also in Ladakh. So I think Russia is aware, and Russia knows that India is very touchy about these issues.
How do you think whether Indian investors are interested in joint investments in Russian economy, and what kind of projects are they ready to develop projects and branches? Thank you very much.
I think India would definitely like to work with Russia for the development of Far East. I think this is one issue on the table. Also, agriculture, as I said, is again another issue where India would like to contribute. Third, of course, is that education. Education is again one big sector where both countries can collaborate. Technology, I think, is again a big one, because India does see itself as going to be the future technological hub. We have lots of students mostly invested in technology. So I think these three areas, I would say, are where Indian investors would like to contribute. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you for your speech and your point of view. It is known that the population of India is very huge and it is still growing very fast. So is there in India the problems connected with the overpopulation, such as the lack of food, water, or place to live? And what is the Indian government doing to what is the Indian government doing to solve these problems if they exist? Thank you.
Well, yes, population explosion, as the term is called, it's been an issue of concern, and for a very short duration when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, there was some governmental effort to actually control the population. But as India is a democracy and is not, unlike China, we could not really force depopulation, or which China did, killing thousands and thousands of embryos and forcing women to abort. That did not really happen in India, but India went with two-child policy, basically through campaign, through mass movement. For example, my grandfather's generation, they would have like 3 to 5 children. My father's generation, 2 children. My generation, 1 child. And now the younger lot is not even interested in having children. But it's happening in a very organic way, very natural way. It did not happen through force. Nobody was forced to go down this path. But population still remains an issue because 1.4 billion people, it's massive. Out of like 7.5 billion, 8 billion people in the world, 1.4 billion in India. It's an issue, but I think mass awareness, mass movement has been very effective in India. We are now seeing a slow decline in our growth rate, in our population growth rate. But I think the government is now also, it has not happened yet, but there's a view within political circles, within intelligentsia in India, that the government must cut down or deny subsidies to people who have more than 2 children. So a lot of families in India, in the rural India, and in fact, in some communities also, they have big families. But the government might be forced, because there is a mass movement or mass awareness building around this idea that subsidies should not be given to those families who bear more than 2 kids. So I think it might happen in India anytime soon.
Dear friends, last question, please.
Thank you for the presentation, and I would like to ask for your interpretation of what Prime Minister Modi said to Putin on shells.
I, in fact, did interpret it on which is banned here. Twitter is blocked, but I did say that Prime Minister Modi, from how I understand it, I may be completely wrong, but this is my interpretation. Prime Minister Modi was essentially appealing not only to Putin, but also to the West, who are, basically involved in a proxy war in Ukraine. One would be foolish and one would be completely ignorant if you do not recognize the fact that the West, the NATO countries, are funding Ukraine. They have sent massive amounts of arms and ammunition to Ukraine, and they continue to be adamant on that position. For example, President Joe Biden, Ursula von der Leyen, the entire Western leadership is persistent that they're not going to change, that Ukraine is in the right position, Russia is on the wrong side of history. And this behavior is costing not just Ukraine or Europe or Russia, but it's affecting other countries also. For example, African countries. Ukraine and Russia being the largest wheat exporters to Africa. They are suffering on that account. Supply chains have been affected by this war. Economies of smaller countries dependent on Ukrainian and Russian imports are getting affected. So Prime Minister Modi clearly was appealing to both President Putin and the Western leadership to end the conflict and resolve it amicably. But clearly, President Putin made it very, very clear that it's the Western leadership that is refusing to end the war. And I would actually agree with him, because the kind of statements President Joe Biden and Ursula von der Leyen have made doesn't give me the confidence that the West is interested in resolving it through dialogue. I think but that has been the history of the United States since the Cold War ended. Since that time till now, if you look at the world conflicts anywhere in Middle East, in South Asia, in Africa, take any conflict, this is the approach that the US has been following. That they will create a conflict and the military-industrial complex will benefit from it, as it is happening right now. The energy sector in the US is benefiting from the war, and the political system headed by Joe Biden is also making hay while the sun shines.
Well, for the last year of race, I would say that I have an American friend. He lives in Japan. But what he said to me is that mostly now Americans don't like Joe Biden, and they want to maybe even Mr. Trump to be the president again.
We'll see in the coming midterm polls. We'll find out how much they like him or not like him.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arti, for your wonderful speech and very interesting information. We really enjoy being with you an hour and a half. So we have a lot of questions and we can discuss a lot concerning the future of Russian and Indian economic relations, and we hope we will do it next time. So thank you very much. So guys.